I would probably consider the mistakes that you've made and just own them. You just need ownership right now. Okay. I did this and it eats at me and I feel horrible about it. And I feel horrible because, and then you explain the things. It's not right to you. It goes against our marriage vows. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help our connection and intimacy. And so these are the mistakes that I'm owning right now. Kipp, what's up, man? Great to see you. We have opposite colors. It's like your screen's white and black. I've got a white shirt and black hat. I don't know. I just noticed that. Maybe that's a dumb thing to notice, but it stood out.
Okay. At least you're aware of your surroundings. There's some value in that. We're working on him, everybody.
You that, I'm just looking at it now. I'm like trying to get the angles, and I'm like, okay, do the cameras look good? Yeah, they look pretty good. So,
yeah. At least everyone knows that we don't wake up calling each other to see if we match or not. So at least we're not doing that number.
We should coordinate for sure. Well, it's good to see you after that really horrible intro, but we don't knock them all out of the park, but there we go.
Most of the time. Cool, man.
Right.
Well, we got some, dude, you post some questions in the Iron Council, our exclusive brotherhood, and the men have answered. We got lots of solid questions for the podcast today.
Yeah. Before we do, I want to go back to something we used to be doing, which was headlines. And we kind of got away from that, I think, just out of being busy and having questions to answer. But we thought we'd revive this a little bit. And it's not so much a headline, it's just more of a cultural phenomenon. I was watching YouTube with my kids this weekend, and Mr. Beast, many of you probably know who that is, came out with a new video. And it was actually a really interesting video. He took a prison inmate, a former prison inmate, and a former either police officer or corrections officer, and he put them in a makeshift prison that he built and said, if both of you survive together as cellmates for 100 days, then you'll split $500,000. And I thought the premise was kind of cool, and it was interesting, but one of my kids or somebody had said that Mr. Beast is a billionaire. And I said, no, there's no way. And I looked, Mr. Beast is a billionaire. And I'm always amazed. I brought this up because I think it's incredible. I love it. I just get frustrated when I hear people say things like nobody should be a billionaire, and then they get after him because he's not donating enough money based on their criteria, as if they could donate even a fraction of what he does. Mr. Beast is somebody who has a lot of philanthropic aspirations. He brings water to impoverished countries. He pays for medical procedures for thousands and thousands of strangers and random people, and he's not required to do any of that. And then I think there's this other issue, and this is a cultural phenomenon that I think is horribly disgusting and repulsive. And that is that we think that just because somebody else figures out how to make money, AKA add value to people's lives, that somehow it takes away from our ability to do it. And that if somebody gets theirs, then we can't get ours. And in the type of economy that we live in, relatively free, I'm not going to say completely free markets, but the type of economy that we live in, we should all be cheering on the streets and celebrating when somebody builds massive amounts of wealth in a very righteous, responsible way, like I believe Mr. Beast has done. Because what it does is it paves the way for other people to do similar things. It creates a business that now can hire people. You have tax revenue that goes into frankly, the needed revenue for the country to operate. Granted, I will say I would love to see that at a fraction of the way it operates now, but you guys understand the point. Yeah. But we should all be cheering him on. We should all be celebrating. This same thing happened when Joe Rogan got that $300 million deal or whatever it was with Spotify. All of a sudden, Joe Rogan's a villain. He's a horrible person. Nobody should have that much money. He doesn't deserve it. Man, we ought to be celebrating and cheering that stuff on. And I wish more of us did embrace the idea that if people build wealth righteously, morally, ethically, then we ought to be able to support them because we know it's possible now.
Totally. I don't know if you want it to go this way, but I'll go this way maybe a little bit. Why? Why do people do it? Like, what is the human condition, or what's the human tendency that causes people to moan and complain about the success of others? And ultimately, I think it's rooted in the idea because they would rather do that than actually face how they're showing up in the world and address the things within their realm of control. It's always easy to moan and complain about what other people are doing. It is a hell of a lot harder to look in the mirror and go, what am I doing with what I have? And I think we purposely get this moral benefit. We think that we're superior or whatever when we get to complain about things that are outside of our control. And to be frank, it's a pitfall that a lot of people fall into, and there's a level of I don't know, I want to say pathetic, but it's just, guys, we got to operate with what's within our realm, and what are you doing with what you have, and stop worrying about what other people are doing.
Yeah, I think that's the primary reason. I will say jealousy probably comes into that as well, but that probably ties into the greater point that you're making. These people who have tremendous levels of success in any aspect, whether it's with their families or in business and finances or fitness, they are the destroyer of excuses. And if you spend any amount of time around any type of these individuals who are achieving at high levels, they don't tolerate your BS. They don't tolerate your nonsense. They don't buy into the same narrative that you have, that you can't, or some magical deck of cards is stacked against you. And so it's really uncomfortable if you're not ready to do the work, to be around people like this, or to hear stories of them succeeding. It's unfortunate, but we can fight against it if you just have the right mindset. And instead of being the victim and making them the villain, cheer along with them, celebrate them, figure out what they did, duplicate it, replicate it, and make yourself into a more capable, successful man.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into some questions. Our first question is from Chad Scott. Kind of a lengthy, but he has a little bit of a backstory here that I think is valuable. He says, I was recently listening to a podcaster who was interviewing a motivational speaker and an author. This individual had gone to prison for many years and was recounting his time in jail before being transferred to prison. After his sentence, but before being transferred to a fellow jailmate, told him what to expect when he gets there. And I love this advice, by the way. He advised him that he would have to fight a lot. And his advice was, you don't have to win every fight, but you have to fight every fight. No one except you will count how many times you win. Of course, this man meant actual fights, but the interviewee related it to his clients in a manner. I posed this question to my battle team. We had a great discussion about it. What we all agreed was the better question is how to choose our battles, realizing sometimes we only recognize some of the important ones once they have passed. So maybe your thoughts if you agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, about the fighting in particular and why we need to fight and all that sort of thing. Yeah, I think it is crucial. Just yesterday, I released a podcast with my friend Pete Roberts, who I know you know really well as well, Kip. And he used a word in the podcast that really stood out to me. And then I actually used it in the title of the podcast. And the word is scrappiness. And when he said that, it really stood out to me as a virtue, a character trait, something that's actually a really good thing to have. Because in the face of few resources or adversity and hardship, or maybe even somebody actually doing something to you to keep you down, your ability to be scrappy. Did we talk about this last week with Nate Diaz too, a little bit? We did, didn't we?
Yeah, totally.
So that word has come up twice in the last week or two now. And that's who I want in my corner. And by the way, that's also the people that we admire and respect. You know, they even I don't know if you remember in the scene Braveheart, but they set up a trap for William Wallace after they had killed his new bride. And the governor or whatever of the village said, let this scrapper come to us. And he did. And you know the history from not the history, but you know the movie and you know the story of the movie. I wouldn't say the history. It's loosely based, but you get it. That's what we want. That's what we celebrate. You know, even watching these fights, these UFC fights over the weekend. Did you watch the fights at all, Kip?
I saw the highlights. I didn't grab the pay-per-view, but I mean,
Du Plessis and what's the other guy's name? Chemov or something. I can't remember his last name.
Yeah.
Anyways, he dominated. But you know what? I think Du Plessis scored a couple points in everybody's book. I really do. He lost the fight. Like, he didn't win a single round. He got dominated. Some people might say he got humiliated. I actually think the opposite. I think he was unprepared to be able to combat the ground game, but he scrapped. And every time he got up, he would smile between rounds. When he was in the corner, he was telling the coach, hey, the last round, he's like, I got to knock him out. This is my only hope. I got to knock him out. He was fighting the whole time. And that's what we as men respect because it's a virtue that we want to espouse. So I agree that we need to be scrappy. We need to fight. We need to take things seriously. We're not going to always have the resources or the abundance or prosperity or skill set or characteristics that everybody else has, but you can always decide to stay in the fight. And if you do, I think over the long haul, you're going to win.
Yeah. Well, and what's so great about that story, and I don't know who the interview was, but like what's so great about it is what happens if that guy goes into jail and he doesn't fight every fight. What if he cowards down when he gets attacked? What will happen? Dude, he'll start on a path where things will be worse for him.
Yeah, everybody will take advantage of him.
Versus yes, absolutely. And so, and I'm not saying everything's a war, right, in where we operate day to day, but like you can't be a pushover, right? Like, and we talked about this a little bit, I think, last week too. It's like, what is it that you're doing? Are you intentional with the choices that you're making? And if you're not, then you need to push back and be intentional about what you're doing. Otherwise, guess who's going to control your world? Everybody but you. You'll be doing everything to appease everybody else, and you'll just be a passive bystander in life. And that's exactly what would happen to this jailmate in the event that he didn't fight every fight. And to your point, we respect the guy who's scrappy. We respect the guy that doesn't give up, that will not be a pushover. That's inspiring. You know, you've trained jiu-jitsu long enough. I'm sure you've had your mat mates or your teammates that are like the guys that there's no give up in them. Mm-hmm. Like those guys inspire you. Like, you know, after rounds and rounds, they still don't give up. I mean, those are inspirational people, regardless of the circumstance, regardless even if they're getting beat up. The fact that they don't give up is inspiring, and we should all. I mean, I think we should all be operating from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, think about like Rudy is another one. Think about the greatest stories ever told. The ones that we as men naturally gravitate towards. Gladiator is another one.
Yeah.
You know, general in the Roman army, down on his luck, wife and son murdered, and then comes back to, you know, basically, essentially take over the Roman Empire. I know these are stories, you know, they're not, they're fictional stories, I know. But the point that I'm making is that we resonate with them for a reason, because they're valuable.
Well, and I love the Rudy
in them.
And I love the Rudy story. Why? Because he doesn't win. Not really.
Right. No.
He gets one play some humiliating playing time. That's it.
Right.
He didn't win anything. Right? Yeah, but it's inspiring. You don't have to win. You just have to show up in a powerful way. That's what you need to do.
Yeah. All right, what's next?
Hard to do. All right. Joe Gunter. I posed this question on our LDS Church Young Men's High Adventure. high adventures, man. Like, just full disclosure for those that aren't LDS, this is like a group of like probably 20 to 40 kids. And some high adventures are 40 to 50 milers a week long out in the wild. Chaos. Like, like
I did one time, Kip, with there was probably 7 or 8 14-year-olds. No, yeah, they were 14 to 16. And 14-year-old boys are just little a-holes. They really are. Yeah. You know, like they're fun. Actually, by the time they turn 14, they're pretty good, but like 12 to 14 is rough at times.
Yeah. Yeah, they're wieners. They're
yeah, but once they get to 14, then they're a little better. But anyways, we had about 7 or 8 of us, and we hiked down. We did a 7-mile hike into a place called Canaryville Falls in southern Utah with our backpacks. So we hiked down 7 miles or so. And then we spent the night, and the boys, they asked me, they said, hey, you know, what time is curfew? I'm like, you guys don't have a curfew. And they're like, what? And I said, you guys are old enough now that you can just, our unofficial motto was do what you want, suffer the consequences. Our real motto that we told the parents was I'll either find a way or make one. But our secret motto was do what you want, suffer the consequences. And so I told the boys, I said, you guys don't have a curfew. Just know we're leaving at 7 a.m. And they said, oh, okay, yeah, okay, whatever. I looked at my watch because I didn't sleep in a tent. I just slept in my sleeping bag. And I looked at my watch. It was 2 a.m. and I heard them down by the creek and they were still noisy and rambunctious. It was only us down there, so it was fine. And then maybe like an hour later, they tried to put a frog in my sleeping bag when I was sleeping. I'm like, God, these boys. So anyways, I get up at 7 or a little earlier and I start packing up my stuff and I get the boys up and they're like, can we sleep longer? I'm like, no, I told you, do what you want, suffer the consequences. Now it's time to suffer. Now it's time to pay. And they're like, okay. I put my bag on. I'm like, man, my bag feels heavy today. And we got to hike 10 miles out to get to a cabin that we're going to spend another day or two at. I put this bag on. I'm like, this is heavy today. But I didn't really think anything of it. I thought, well, my back's probably sore. My legs are sore from the day before. And I'm hiking out with the boys. And I'm just like, why is this so heavy? And I went for a couple of miles. And then we get to this hill. And it felt really heavy. And I dropped it. I'm like, what is going on with my bag? I opened it up. They had put rocks in my bag at night while they were awake and while I was asleep.
I love those
and
kids.
So I take the rocks out. And they're just laughing. They thought it was hilarious. Anyways, I don't know why I brought that up other than we had a good time, and being able to do that stuff with young men in your community, I think is invaluable service. Some of the parents did get mad that I said, do what you want, suffer the consequences. I said, you know what? The boys had a good time. They're stronger, they're more capable, and they're alive. So that seems like a win to me. And they were pretty good about it.
Dude, the last high adventure I had, it was to Kings Peak. From the south side of the Uintas. It was over a 40-miler. Oof. And 10 miles a day. I mean, it was rough for an adult. Yeah. It was really rough for some of these kids, man. And they were not prepped. I mean, I remember I had a night where I had this kid yelling, help! Like I'm literally sleeping and I hear a kid yelling, help! in the middle of the night. And I'm like, what the crap? I get out. There's something outside my tent. I heard something. And he's freaking out like the bear's going to eat him or something. I flip open my flashlight. There's food everywhere. And I'm like, did you guys hang up your food? They're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, do you have food in your tent? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, everyone get out of your tent, right? I'm like, you morons. But dude, it was classic, man. I love high adventures. Oh, anyhow, to Joe's question.
Anyways, back to the question.
Yeah. All right. With the spiritual understanding I have today, how would I invite God into a past trial, transforming it into a testimony rather than stumbling block? This also led to a side question of why is having some type of spiritually important in a man's life? Ryan and Kip, what would your answer be to these questions?
Well, I think part of it is a reframe, and it's an eternal perspective. reframing. A lot of people think, why does this happen to me? I've said it. We've all said it. Why is this happening to me? Why did I get fired? Why did I have this relationship issue? Why did I get in a car accident? Why whatever? What if instead you decided, well, it's happening for me? And that could be true or not true, but what if you just operated as if it was? What if you just made the decision that this is true, that things are happening for me? Would you approach the solution differently? I think the answer is yes. And so if things are happening for you, then to me, that means that some designer is behind that. There's a designer behind that timeline. If it's happening for you, then somebody or something is making it happen. Some people call it the universe or a muse or whatever. It's God, and God is making those things happen. Now, we still have free will and we still have free agency. We can decide, do I want to go left or right? Do I want to embrace this as a lesson, or do I want to wallow in my own self-pity? I can make those decisions. I'm able to do those things. But I believe that God does these for a couple of reasons. One, it's a test. And it's not a test like, I want to trick you. I don't think God's doing that. Some people think there's a malicious God where, hey, I'm trying to trick you and stumble you and make you fall and mess you up and embarrass and humiliate you. That's not what I'm saying when I say test. When I say test, I think what he's doing is giving us moments of hardship and struggle and adversity in order to make ourselves stronger. Because any time that I've ever had something challenging and difficult in my life, I've come out okay. And I know that because here I am. Yeah. That's made me stronger. I also think it's to prove to ourselves, not to him, he already knows. We don't need to prove anything to him.
Confidence.
To prove to ourselves. Right. Prove to ourselves that we're capable of the next level. I feel like any time anything negative or bad happens, that's a test for me. And if I pass it, I get to go to the next level. And if I don't pass it, then I stay where I am. And I think God's giving us opportunities. They're hard, they're brutal, many of them. They're tragic in some cases. But if you can come out ahead, you can overcome that, you can be stronger, and also you can help other people do that. And I think that's the second part of it, is that if I suffer in a way, then other people might suffer less if I'm willing to share the stories that I've learned. Divorce is a great example of that. Yeah. I went through that divorce, a lot of it my own making. Takes two to tango, sure, but a lot of it my own making. And I'm taking the lessons that I've learned over the past 2.5, almost 3 years now, and putting together a course called Divorce Not Death. Because if I can take those lessons and my new understanding based on personal experience and help another man get through that or not go through a divorce at all, then my adversity was a positive thing, not only in my life, but in the life of another man. And I feel like that's my sole objective on this earth, is to learn, to grow, to get better, and to help other people do the same. And that's my eternal perspective, and that's where my views on God come in. The conversation about why does God let bad things happen to good people, that's another conversation. We can certainly have it, but those are two different things, I think.
Well, and I love this, Ryan. You know, the one thing I'd add to your statement is, for just a clarity, the past lives where? Nowhere. It's over, other than in your mind. And so what's so great about this is at any time you get to learn from it. You know, it's like, oh, I had this tough past, I didn't learn anything from it. Okay, well, you could do that now. You could still retrospect and go, I'm going to go back 20 years and I'm going to choose to learn from that difficult circumstance right now, even though I didn't learn back then. That's the beauty of taking an experience and a circumstance and a hardship and pivoting to grow from it. You can do that at any time. It doesn't matter when. And so I love to call that out. And we talked about this too on the podcast, that like stress is an enhancer. I love one of my favorite quotes from Andrew Huberman is around this idea that like your brain literally changes when stress is involved, allowing you to grow and develop in a way that normally you wouldn't be able to. So that begs the idea that challenges are what's required for us to grow and evolve and to become better versions of ourselves. And the God I believe in is focused on me evolving and becoming the best version of myself. So guess what that involves? Challenges, difficulties, and stress. Now, the mindset is critical, because if I don't have the mindset of an internal perspective of growth and it's woe is me, victim mentality, then I'm not going to learn and grow. In fact, it may break me. And I may go in the complete opposite direction. But the beautiful part about what we're saying here is that's a choice. That's a choice that we can just take on.
Well, I really like what you said about going to the past and revisiting that, because it is a requirement that you do that. And I'll tell you why. All of us are operating based on scripts and stories that were written a long time ago. There was a script written about you and told about you that you had no say in. You had no say in what that story was. We were born to, mom and dad, whether they were there or not, or other people came into our lives. We experienced things that we had no control over, we had no influence over, and we were just stuck. And then people started inputting thoughts and ideas and concepts into our brains, some of them very positive and constructive, some of them very negative and destructive. And we believe, to a degree, everything that we've ever been told, unless you can learn to rewrite some of the bad code. And that's what all of us as men should be doing. If we have something that goes south and it's on us, it's our responsibility, that might be a one-off thing. You know what to be aware of is when you start to see trends in your performance. If you start to see trends in your performance, it's because you're operating on a script that is not serving you. Bad things happen. We mess up, we make mistakes. That might not be bad programming. It just means that we're human beings. But if every relationship that you're in ends the same way, or it ends up being in the same kind of dynamic and it's not good, it's toxic, that's a bad script that you believed. And the only way for you to rewrite it, is to go back and visit and say, why do I believe that? Where did I learn that from? Who told me that? Why do I think that's a good thing? What does that story produce in my life? Play it out, find the answers, and then start plugging in new elements of that story and watch how your progress changes. It's a requirement to figure out what those stories are and rewrite the code that doesn't serve you well.
Yeah, and available for us to do anytime.
Anytime.
Which is awesome, really, that you don't have to experience that again to learn from it. Thank goodness for that.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Unless you're dense like I am, you just want to keep learning things the hard way.
What's the phrase, right? It's like you can choose to learn the lesson, or life will help you learn the lesson. Either way, you're learning it. It's just how much suffering are you going to have to go through?
Yeah, well, the other one I like is a smart man learns from his mistakes. A wise man learns from the mistakes of others. You can be the other, by the way.
Yeah.
Like you can go back 20 years and say, oh, yeah, I remember when I did that. That was a pivotal moment in my life that maybe I should change. Or, you know what? There's other things that happen in your life where you start to run into identity crises, but you may not even notice it. Maybe you go through a divorce and then you lose some of your identity, or you lose your job, or you retire and you lose some of your identity. And when you lose that identity, you start to change your behavior for better or worse, but you just need to figure out which it is so you can make sure you're doing the right thing and being intentional about it.
Yeah.
All right, what's next?
Denver Waters. How can I approach senior leadership about issues and blind spots I see in our processes without coming across as just complaining? I don't always have full solutions, but I want them to understand both my experience and the experience of others, since it feels like they're somewhat disconnected from what's happening on the ground. I've never heard that before, ever.
Well, so he's talking specifically about the Iron Council. So I'm grateful that he's aware of that.
Yeah. Is he?
And I'm gonna.
Maybe he's not though.
Oh, maybe. I guess maybe not. I was going to. I assumed that was the case, but I was going to apply it broadly anyways. But you might be right. Yeah. I assumed. I actually messaged him and I said, "Hey, man, like I would love to hear your." I told him to follow the chain of command, and then send me a message. So I thought it was about the Iron Council specifically, but maybe not.
He replied, I should have clarified, I'm talking about my career, not the Iron Council.
Oh.
So there you go.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I wasn't a dick to him.
On the podcast. Well, first off, listen up.
Yeah. Well, no, even in the comment, I was like, hey man, thanks for sharing. Like, have you gone through your chain of command and shoot me a message? I'd love to hear your feedback. That's what I said as a response to him. So I'm glad I handled it like a mature adult. Okay, so I was going to apply it broadly anyways. Well, look here. Okay, so here's my advice. And Kipp, I know you're going to have a lot of good advice on this one. I'll give you three things. Three things you should focus on. Number one, use your chain of command. Like, you don't need to go to the owner and start airing out your grievances if you have a team leader or you have a shift supervisor or the manager of the store or whatever. I don't know your work. But always use the chain of command, because if you go straight to the manager, you're going to do two things. You're going to piss off the manager, or let's say you go straight to the owner. You're going to piss off the owner because he's busy. He doesn't have time for all of the things. That's why he has managers and team leaders. So you're going to piss off the owner, and then you're going to piss off the manager because you just threw him under the bus without giving him a chance, like a man, to actually deal with it. So always use the chain of command. So I would go to my team leader, and then if that didn't get resolved, I'd go to my shift manager. And if that didn't get resolved, I'd go to the store manager. If that didn't get resolved, and so on and so forth. But always use the chain of command. Number two, consider your tone. Okay, if your tone is one of complaining and grievances and negativity and why you don't like things, that's going to hit differently than if you said, hey, I love being here and I want to make this better and I have this cool idea and here's something that I think could be implemented, or here's one thing that I really like, but if it was tweaked this way, it might help based on what I've heard other people say. You're sharing the same information, but you're changing the tone of your voice, the inflection, the enthusiasm, your body language even falls into that. And then the third is, remember that what you're sharing is your opinion. So be very careful of stating it as actual fact, because you don't know. Okay, you don't know everything. You know some things, but your manager might have a reason for doing it the way that he's doing it, and you just might not be privy to it yet. So if you go in there accusatory, believing that you know all the facts and that you know best, it comes across as arrogant and condescending, when I would suggest you go in there and say, if Kipp, you're my shift supervisor, I might say, hey Kipp, can I talk with you for a second? Again, asking that question is a sign of respect. Right? Can I talk with you for a second? I value your opinion. Okay. So we get to our conversation and I just say, hey, I've got a couple of thoughts, but I know that I'm only coming from this little piece of the puzzle. And so I might be way off base. There might be other moving parts that I'm not even aware of, but can I share some feedback from my perspective, from where I sit?
That's the key. Yeah.
And then hopefully he says, yeah, I'd love to hear it. If you have a good manager, he would say yes. And then you share, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Again, I know that I'm not seeing all of it, but I'm seeing this, I'm hearing this. There seems to be a little bit of disconnect here, and I'm really just here out of curiosity so I can understand the bigger picture so we in this department can do a better job. And that's going to be well more received than, hey, this is wrong and that's wrong and you should do this and you should do that and you guys are idiots and why aren't you?
Totally. I mean, and nothing personal, right? For Denver, right? But like there's a sentiment in his questions, right? I want them to understand both my experience and the experience of others. Why? Since it feels like somewhat disconnected from what's happening. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying. I read it, and this is what you have to be careful, because not everybody's going to read it this way. I read it as you care about your job and you care about this. That's how I read it. I just think the delivery needs to be tweaked a little bit, because the problem is your boss might not read it the same way I'm reading it, even though you might be meaning it that way. And I think that's what you're alluding to, Kipp, is it has a little bit of that, even though I think you're doing it for the right reasons. Your method might need a little adjusting.
Yeah. And this is where the one thing I'd add is, like, you need to alignment to strategic focus or alignment to organizational success is critical, right? So, like, if an employee come to me and says, I really want you to understand what we're dealing with. Dude, this isn't about you. Like, you may think it's about you, but guess what it's about? It's actually about the organization of 1,000 people. So have that perspective when you go to the leader to get feedback. Does it make sense? Because where are we going as a whole, right? And they may not understand what's happening because of boots on ground. Of course, just like you may not know what they're dealing with at the leadership level. So be very slow to assume that you even understand what their focus and their top priorities are. They may not be the same priorities that you're experiencing on the ground, right? So, and you've already kind of alluded to this, Ryan. This is where I'd approach this from the perspective of, hey, I see some gaps, or I know our strategic direction is XYZ for the organization. What could I do? Or I have some ideas I'd love to bring to the table that I think would be highly beneficial to help us go in that direction while mitigating some concern. Align to the success of the org, right? Because they're playing a more strategic game than your experience or a handful of people. They're worried about the organization as a whole, especially at a senior leadership level. So, and the last thing, and you already touched it, but I have to say it, is like, own your perception as perception, not truth, right? So if you go to the table, if you do express some frustration, it seems, I believe it feels like, right, be very slow to place judgment and labels on the thing. And even if you don't have like a winning solution, I'd recommend that you do come to the table with something. Don't just come with a complaint. Come with some ideas at least, that like, I see this and I have some ideas that I'd love to suggest, or I think this might be beneficial, but be assertive in it and be aligned to helping the org, not just yourself. Because, and that's the last thing I'd say, is like, a lot of individual contributors, when they're upset, they're very narrow focused, right? Because that's their lane. But a lot of senior leadership, they're dealing with a much broader thing, right? So align your issue with how it benefits the entire org, and it will come across less as you just worried about yours and you're being a squeaky wheel, and that you're actually trying to contribute to the organization as a whole.
Yeah. One thing you said, Kipp, that made me, it's a great question. Well, because he's asking it, he's trying to do it right. And I guess that's the perspective that we have.
Totally.
Is you're asking us because you want to do it right, and we get to see that, but nobody else might. Habit number 5, 7 habits of highly effective people seek first to understand, then to be understood. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, because your upset might be part of a bigger picture and in a more important issue that they're dealing with, right? Like, so, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, how many times have I've been in too many to count situations, even in a conversation with one other person, not an organization like we're talking about here, where I come with something that I'm upset with or bothered with, and if I do it in a really healthy way, that person says, oh, well, the reason that is because of X, Y, and Z. Like, let me give you a really silly example of how often we do this. You call your wife up, or maybe you text her. She doesn't answer. She's usually pretty good about getting back with you. She doesn't answer. You could give her another text, maybe 30, 45 minutes later, no answer. You call her an hour and a half after that, no answer. Okay, now you're kind of freaking out a little bit.
She's stepping out on
right?
you.
Yeah. She left with the kids, and she's gone, and she's mad at you for some thing that you conjured up in your brain that didn't really happen, and the world's going to fall apart. She's going to want a divorce. She's going to take half of your money, and your marriage is over. So just pack it up. You're done. And then you get home that night, and she's there, and she's loving and happy and excited, and you're confused because she didn't get back with you right away. And you say, hey, hon, I called you. I didn't hear from you for like 2 or 3 hours. And she says, oh, yeah, I was with the kids at the lake and my phone fell in the lake, and so I had to order a new one. And you're like, I'm an idiot. Because you were ready to chastise her and made this big ordeal out of nothing because you didn't understand. So that stuff like that is way more common, and it happens all the time. Just be very careful. Understand first, and then you can be understood.
Yeah, love it. We had an old school, man, pulling up Covey.
I knew you'd like that. I did that for you, man. Right. I did that for you because I knew you'd like that.
I read that book when I was like a freshman in college, and no joke, it was like a pivotal time in my life. Like that book was like a good one. Really big for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anonymous. What advice / pointers can you give a man who has to tell his wife about his addiction? Sorry, I'm okay. Let me pause because I want to make sure I'm not exposing something in the question. Okay, it's fine. Let me read it again. Sorry.
Okay.
What advice and pointers can you give a man who has to tell his wife about his addiction? Since joining the IC, I've learned that I need to take steps and forgive my parents for the wrong of my childhood that was causing me to seek validation in pornography. I now feel I need to tell my wife about this addiction, and I'm unsure how to go about it other than explaining to her that it's not her and that is the problem. It was a psychological effect of my childhood.
I mean, I would be a little careful saying it's not you. This is the psychological effect of my childhood. I don't think I would lead off with that because it sounds like you're rationalizing or justifying the behavior a little bit. Like, that's not my fault. Like, it's not your fault, not my fault.
It's my childhood. Yeah.
Right? So I'm not saying you're wrong. It might actually be some of that. But I would be careful on that. I will say this. I'm going to give you a couple ideas that I think will help. Also, go look at Sathya Sam. Sathya is spelled Sathiya. Sathya Sam. And he's got a really great course on pornography. In fact, he offered an exclusive course inside of our Brotherhood, the Iron Council, that if you're part of the Iron Council, you already have access to. So it's there, overcoming pornography addiction. There's also Breaking Pornography channel. So this would be a good question for the appropriate channels as well. But here's some factors that I would consider. Number one, when you do have this conversation, you might give her a little bit of a prep to say, hey, hon, can I talk with you about something tonight? Everything's fine, but I need to have a serious conversation because, and then you tell her that you want to make sure the relationship is as powerful as it can be. And isn't that the ultimate outcome? So what I would say is, hey, I just want to have a conversation. I want to show up in the most powerful way that I can for you and the kids. And I want to have the best relationship that we can possibly have. And that's how I would lead the conversation off with. Because if you explain that outcome, when she gets upset, and she probably will, especially if it's still continuing, and it sounds like it is, then you can always bring it back to the outcome. So if she gets upset, you can acknowledge that. You can validate that. Don't say, I know how you feel. You don't know how she feels. Say, I know that you're upset. I can understand why you would be upset. And it's justified. It's warranted. And this is why it's been so hard for me to tell you, because I knew how upset you would be. So that's one thing I would add. Number two is I would probably consider the mistakes that you've made and just own them. Not like my childhood trauma. No, not yet. We can get into that. You just need ownership right now. Okay? I did this and it eats at me and I feel horrible about it. And I feel horrible because, and then you explain the things. It's not right to you. It goes against our marriage vows. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help our connection and intimacy. And so these are the mistakes that I'm owning right now. So that would be point number two. Point number three, what are you going to do about it? if you come to her with this information, you should already have a plan in place, ready to go. So, hey, the last thing I want to share with you is my plan for overcoming this, what I'm going to do moving forward. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to join this Overcoming Pornography channel in the Iron Council. I'm going to take the course. I'm going to reach out to Cynthia, and I'm going to tackle this through credible, qualified sources. And I'm going to put some filters on my computer to block that stuff out. And you put in some of those boundaries that you're going to have in place, and you explain to her what those are, and you ask her if there's anything she can think of that might be helpful on this path. Because if you do this right, I think she'll still be really, really upset. But the fact that you're telling her rather than being caught is a good thing. And you might be able to enlist her in your change if you do this correctly. So those are the pointers I would give.
I think it's spot on. I don't have anything to add. I mean, and by the way, like the formula you just pointed out, just attach that to anything.
Right.
I need to have a hard conversation with the business partner. I need to have a hard conversation with an employee. You know, this is solid. Unified outcome, align on unified outcome, identify ownership and responsibility, and then move to communicating what is the plan of action that you're going to do moving forward. It's awesome. It's perfect.
I will say,
Good
just
job,
as a
Brian.
follow-up, thank you. I appreciate that. I've had to have a lot of hard conversations about dumb shit I've done over the years. So
you're like, I got reps.
And then not to laugh and make light of what he's experiencing. The other thing is the childhood trauma stuff and some of the reasoning and the logic and stuff behind it, that's valid. So part of your healing process might be therapy. And if that's a decision you decide to make, you would communicate that with her. And then as you're doing your sessions, your therapist is going to help you get to the root of some of these behavioral issues. And then you can after you've already confessed and shared and everything else, and she's on the same page, then and only then can you start talking about, hey, I talked with my therapist and they said that part of the reason this might be is because of this, or what they've seen is this behavior in individuals who have this past history. And so that's really good for me to know because it equips me with the knowledge of what I need to overcome. So you're still not shifting blame. You're actually saying this could be a reason, but you're also accepting responsibility, saying this is what I need to do to overcome this reason that I've had. But I think that's a little bit down the road, not immediately.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it would come across as though you're blaming your childhood, your past self, and you're a victim of it, right? Yeah, totally. Yep. All right, Simon Pratt, interesting question. What are effective ways to respond to public haters that reduces conflict and promotes understanding without wasting energy on those unwilling to listen and change?
I'm mixed on this. I mean, sometimes you catch me in a bad moment and I'm like, I'm going to get this person back. And I just say something dumb and then I get into a spat, a digital spat, which is never helpful for anything. So I want to throw that little disclaimer out there. The proper way to handle it is to just ignore it. That's the proper way, is that whether it's online or in person, somebody says something, makes a comment, or the proper thing to do is just ignore it. If you feel like it needs to be addressed, then I've found that the best thing you can do is to be disarming. So you maybe make a joke of it, like not at their expense. So for example, if somebody on social media, is he just talking about social media or just life in general?
I don't know why. I assume social media, but he doesn't say. Just respond to
because
public
most of the
haters,
time.
So
Yeah. It sounds a little social media-esque, but if somebody says, you're an idiot, I might say, man, imagine if you knew me, how much more of an idiot you'd actually know I am. It's disarming. It's like there's nothing to respond to with that. And so that's it. When I'm doing it right, that's what I would do. I can't say I always go that route. Or if somebody, says, like makes an accusation, if it's true, I mean, if you feel like you have to address it, then you might say, oh, you know what, you're right. And that was a really hard time for me. And I'm so glad that I addressed it. And I'm glad that you're addressing it now too, because here's the path that might help you with anything that you might be dealing with from your past. It's like, it's disarming. It's like, you just own it. Yeah. And there's nothing they can do to come back from any of that. I mean, really what's going to happen most of the time is they will say the same thing over again. It's like, okay, well, you already said that. Again, when I'm doing it right, I try to maintain a one response rule. So if somebody comes to me and is a jerk and I feel like I have to say something back, as a rule that I don't always follow, and I've made it a goal to be way better at this, as a rule, I give one response back. So if somebody says something rude, I give my disarming answer back, and that's it. I'm allowed one answer, no more. Unless that person changes their behavior. And sometimes that does happen. You know, I had a situation not too long ago where a guy was a little belligerent with me. This is a guy I know, was a little belligerent with me. And instead of debating the argument, it was a little bit more like personal attacks and insults. And I responded back, I would say in kind. I think I could have done a better job, but I didn't. But I ended up leaving and saying, hey, you know, like I guess we're done here or whatever. And that's it. And then later he came back and told me that that day he was going through a very difficult personal situation. And he said, I need to talk with you about it. And I need to say, I'm sorry. And I actually messaged him back. I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm glad you reached out because I need to say sorry too. And we hopped on a call and we had a great productive conversation because both of us were willing to just let it go. And we said, hey, you know what? Let's wipe the slate clean. We're good. We're solid. And we are. And I've had other people do that. Like they do that all the time. One guy messaged me. He said something on social media and I responded back intelligently, but calmly. And I didn't attack him or insult him or anything. And months later, he sent me a message on Instagram. I remember this. And he said, hey man, I'm really sorry. That's all he wrote. And I wrote, sorry for what? And he says, well, months ago, I had made this comment. And when he said it, I'm like, I do remember that. I had made this comment and I had just lost my job. And my wife and I had just got into an argument. And then I jumped on social media and that's when I responded to your post or whatever. And he said this, he said, but you handled it with a lot of respect and grace, probably something I wouldn't have done. And I just want to tell you I'm sorry and I appreciate that. So you never know.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you don't have to respond. I've had someone go off on me and then literally a week later they're like, yeah, sorry about that. I didn't even respond to them. They're just like, yeah, I have demons. And I'm like, got it. Just whatever. Simon, you said something on there that I think is profound, and I'd like to call it out, is that without wasting energy on those unwilling to listen and change. Here's the reality. When are people typically willing to listen and change? It's not in arguments. It's not through belittlement. It's not. And I find it fascinating. Rarely will anyone ever go, oh my gosh, you belittled me, shame me publicly on social media. So you know what, you're right, Ryan. I see this differently now.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's not the conditions of evolution and change. It never is. So in most cases, public haters are not in the space of change. They're in the space of validating how they already feel. That's why they're publicly hating you. They're not reaching out for insight. So, and I think I think it's important for us all to remember that. Whenever someone is engaged in an argument, what's the root of the argument? Is it to be enlightened, to evolve and change? Are they even in a growth mindset? Or do they have a fixed mindset and they're just validating their existing feelings by lashing out on you? If it's the latter, then it's a waste of energy and time. There is no change in that circumstance. So don't waste your time.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier with the gentleman who needs to talk with his wife about his pornography use. Identify the outcome. Yeah. What do you want from this? You know, if there's a hater, do you want to be left alone? In that case, then just leave it alone, because engaging is going to only exacerbate the problem. Is it to convince somebody? If you want to convince somebody, then you have to de-escalate. You have to diffuse. That's the only way you can do that, to your point, Kip. If it's to teach a lesson to everybody else, which I have, you know, like if somebody comes at me on something like hunting, for example, I can respond intelligently and then take that conversation and share it with other people to enlighten other people who might be more poised to learn something because they're not agitated the way that the responder might have been. So think about what the outcome is and act accordingly, which is a good reminder for me. I need to do better at that. So it's a good reminder for me. Yes, I do have time for one more.
Okay. Peter Betancourt, if you could go back and redo an interview, who would you choose and why?
I don't know. I'd have to think. I was looking at it today because I was putting together a podcast for our next interview. 560 of them. I mean, there's been interviews, and I'm not going to say, but there's been interviews that I probably just would not have released at all. You know, and I don't think I'd go back and actually do it at all because I would not see a different outcome. And it wasn't disagreement. I've never had one where it's been such. Actually, I did have one guy who I asked a question, and I don't know why he got so agitated. It was a little bit of a pushback on something he said, so I asked a follow-up question, and he got so agitated, and he hung up. I was interviewing him for my podcast. And I asked him a question about what something means. Like, oh, can you, you said this word or you said this, I can't remember exactly what it was, but you said this word or you said this thing. What do you mean by that? And I think he took it as confrontational or challenging. And he said something like, if you don't know what that means, you're an idiot and I don't have time for this. Or he's like something like, and hung up. So I emailed him and I said, hey man, that was the strangest thing I've ever had happen. I'm not sure why you hung up when I asked you a question. And he wrote back and he's very agitated. He said, well, you're an idiot. And if you're not doing your audience any justice or favor, I'm like, oh, okay, best wishes to you. Like, you were on my podcast. I was asking you questions. That's how this works. So I've had that, but I would not interview that guy again. I don't know. I don't know. I can't answer that. I mean, we've done 560 interviews at this point. And I think if there was one that I'd want to go back and redo, I would probably just do a part 2. And
which you've
there's
done.
A lot of it. Yeah, and I go back and I do interview with those individuals. So I don't know. I think more than just redoing it, I guess this falls into line with my thinking that I don't get that chance, so I don't really need to entertain it all that much. I think there's lessons to be learned, and I do that after every interview. I do an after-action review, and I ask myself, okay, did I accomplish what I wanted to accomplish? Did we address and talk about the thing that I felt was going to be useful to the guys who were listening? What did I do well? Well, I came prepared and I asked great questions. What didn't I do so well? Maybe I got thrown off, or maybe he said something that, and I've had this happen where people will say something that's challenging. This is my biggest regret. I'll answer this question this way. My biggest regret in some interviews is that I don't push hard enough back on my guest when they say something I don't agree with. I think there's a way to do it tactfully and respectfully, but I really do want to be more forthright if I disagree with something they say. So that's something I'm learning and trying to improve at. So rather than redoing it, there's a lesson that tends to reoccur for me.
Yeah, and what's at the root of that? Just So you're representing your audience better and getting deeper understanding of the thing that by surface level we might disagree with.
I mean, isn't that the point of a good discussion, that you walk away with new information?
Yeah.
And the only way to walk away with new information or insight is to talk with people that you either haven't heard what they're sharing before, or you disagree with it. So Jordan Harbinger, the Jordan Harbinger Show, he's been a longtime advocate and friend. And he said something to me one time. He said, you know, Ryan, as a podcaster, you have a voice. You get to ask people all the questions that you want to ask them. But the people listening, your audience, they don't have a voice. They just have the ears to listen. And your job is to be their mouthpiece. So you need to ask them questions that they would want to have answered. So when somebody brings up a thing that I don't understand, a concept I don't understand, or an issue I don't necessarily agree with, it's safe to assume that there's other people who are listening who feel the same way. And I've heard podcasts where I'm almost jumping through the radio, like, ask this question, ask this question, ask this question. And then the interviewer doesn't ask the question, and I leave the conversation feeling frustrated. And so I assume that's probably happened with our podcast as well. Guys are listening like, oh, you didn't ask, I wanted to know this. And it's my job to anticipate what those questions might be, and also to anticipate, and I can hear them. I can hear them in my head when people hear something and they're like, oh, Ryan he better ask this. I can hear it. And so I better, because my job is to serve the people who are listening. I think an arrogant person might say, hey, this is my show. I can do what I want. I try not to be arrogant. It does get the better of me at times, but my job is to serve the people who are listening. So I better ask questions that they would want to ask if the roles were reversed, if they were in the room and I was the one listening.
Totally. I love it, man. Well, I mean, you mentioned this earlier on the call, as you know, an opportunity for us to learn from our past, right, and use that to serve other people. You brought up the Divorce Not Death course that's going to be up and coming. To learn more about that, that's divorcenotdeath.com to sign up and to reserve a spot, right, for when that gets scheduled. As always, you can connect with Mr. Michler on X and Instagram at Ryan Michler. Any other call outs?
No, that's it for now. Stay connected on the socials and the newsletter at orderofman.com, and then also Divorce Not Death. You hit them. So guys, really good questions today. Cool. I know we got a lot of questions answered, but we have a lot more. So we'll hit those next week, and also ones from Facebook as well. So I appreciate you guys. Keep the good questions rolling, and we'll keep trying to give you answers. But until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.